In January of 2006, a message moved through New Haven, Connecticut, with the quiet finality of a factory whistle that would not sound again. The U.S. Repeating Arms Company announced that the old Winchester plant would close. The address on Winchester Avenue, tied for generations to one of the most famous names in American firearms, would no longer build the rifles that had made that name feel almost inseparable from the American outdoors. Among the models affected was the Winchester Model 1894, the lever-action rifle that had crossed from hardware store tool to family inheritance, from hunting camp utility to national symbol. It was not the first time Winchester had changed owners. It was not the first time the company had struggled with debt, labor costs, aging machinery, or a market that no longer rewarded old manufacturing habits. But this closing felt different because the Model 1894 had always carried more than a serial number. It carried a geography, New Haven steel, Connecticut machine work, a brand memory that reached backward into the age of railroads, mail-order catalogs, smokeless powder, and a frontier that Americans were already turning into legend by the time the rifle appeared. But the real story is not how a rifle conquered the Wild West. The real story is how a rifle arrived just as the frontier was becoming memory, and then helped sell that memory for more than a century. Every week on this channel, we follow the engineers, factories, patents, contracts, and business decisions that made famous weapons possible, and sometimes destroyed the institutions that built them. Subscribe if you want firearm history told not as myth, but as industrial history. To understand the Winchester 1894, we have to begin with a contradiction. The rifle became one of the most powerful symbols of the American frontier, yet it was not born at the height of the frontier, it was born near the end of it. By the early 1890s, the old open range was shrinking. Barbed wire had cut across grazing land. Railroads had connected remote towns to national markets. Federal authority reached farther than it had a generation earlier. The famous cattle drive era was already receding. The gunfighters, scouts, marshals, and outlaws who would later fill paperback covers and movie screens were being transformed from messy historical people into cultural archetypes. This is the first key to the Model 1894. It did not simply serve the frontier, it served the memory of the frontier. And Winchester understood memory better than almost any arms company in America. The company's roots went back to the mid-19th century world of repeating arms, when the idea of a shoulder weapon that could fire multiple shots without reloading after every discharge still felt mechanically ambitious and commercially risky. Oliver Winchester, a clothing manufacturer turned investor, had entered the firearms business through the corporate lineage of Volcanic and New Haven Arms, the Henry rifle of the Civil War era, and then the Winchester Model 1866 and Model 1873 gave the company a recognizable identity. The repeating rifle as a practical American machine. The Model 1873 would later be marketed and remembered as the gun that won the West, a phrase more useful as advertising than as precise history. But the 1873 did something real. It put the Winchester name into the hands of settlers, ranchers, lawmen, hunters, and merchants at a time when a repeating rifle was both a tool and a sign of modernity. By the 1880s, however, Winchester faced a difficult problem. Its fame was built on lever-action repeaters, but the ammunition world was changing. Black powder cartridges had carried the 19th century. They were familiar, robust, and dirty. They produced smoke, fouling, and limited velocity by later standards. The next generation of firearms would be shaped by smokeless powder, smaller caliber high-velocity cartridges, stronger actions, and new expectations about range and reliability. A company could not live forever on the romance of the Model 1873. It needed engineering. That engineering came, in large part, from John Moses Browning. Browning was born in Ogden, Utah in 1855, the son of Jonathan Browning, a gunsmith who had brought practical metalworking knowledge into a frontier environment far removed from the mature arms-making districts of Connecticut and Massachusetts. Ogden was not New Haven. It did not have Winchester's factory complex, its machine tool culture, its network of trained production workers, or its proximity to the older Gun Valley traditions of New England. What Ogden had was necessity. A broken firearm in a frontier town could not always be returned to a distant maker. It had to be understood, repaired, modified, and made useful again by someone with a bench, tools, and judgment. John Browning grew up inside that world. He learned firearms not first as catalog products, but as mechanisms under stress. Springs, blocks, pins, levers, bolts, bearing surfaces, fouling, pressure, timing. His education was physical before it was theoretical. That mattered because Browning's greatest gift was not decoration. It was mechanical compression. He could look at a problem and remove the parts that did not need to be there. His designs often appear almost inevitable after the fact, but that is the illusion of good engineering. The simple answer is usually simple only after someone is paid the full price of finding it. Winchester first recognized Browning's value in the early 1880s after seeing one of his single-shot rifle designs. Company executive Thomas G. Bennett traveled west and negotiated the purchase of Browning's patent rights. The design became the Winchester Model 1885 single-shot. Available records and standard firearms histories place this transaction at the beginning of a long, highly productive relationship between Browning and Winchester. The business structure was important. Winchester generally bought Browning designs outright. Browning received a lump sum. Winchester received the manufacturing rights. The finished gun carried the Winchester name. The designer's genius became the company's property. For Winchester, this made sense. It reduced uncertainty. It gave the company control over production, pricing, branding, and distribution. For Browning, it brought money and access to a manufacturing system no frontier shop could match. But it also created a tension that would later break the relationship. Browning produced designs. Winchester converted them into products. The brand captured the public memory. The Model 1894 emerged from that arrangement at the exact moment when lever-action rifles faced their most important technical test. Smokeless powder was changing everything. Black powder had powered firearms for centuries, but it came with limits that users simply accepted. It created dense smoke. It left corrosive residue. It required more frequent cleaning. It constrained velocity. Smokeless propellants, developed in Europe in the late 19th century, offered far greater energy with less smoke and less fouling. Military powers understood the implications quickly. Smaller bullets could travel faster. Trajectories could flatten. Soldiers could fire without immediately revealing their position in a cloud of white smoke. For sporting arms, the transformation was just as significant. A deer rifle could become lighter, faster, flatter shooting, and cleaner. But there was a mechanical catch: pressure. A firearm action is not just a loading system, it is a pressure vessel with moving parts. At the moment of firing, the cartridge case expands. The bolt or breech block must remain locked, and the receiver has to contain forces that arrive violently and instantly. A design that is adequate for one pressure regime can be dangerous in another. The old lever-action systems that had worked well with black powder cartridges could not simply be assumed safe for the new smokeless loads. Winchester needed a lever-action rifle that could preserve the company's identity while entering the new ammunition age. That was the Model 1894's central achievement. The rifle was patented by Browning and introduced by Winchester in 1894. Its action used a strong locking arrangement suitable for the cartridges Winchester intended to offer, and its receiver was designed around a compact, practical repeating rifle format. Early rifles were chambered for black powder cartridges such as 32-40 and 38-55, but the great turning point came with the smokeless 30 Winchester centerfire, better known to generations of hunters as the 30-30 Winchester. The 30-30 was introduced in the mid-1890s and became one of the most important sporting cartridges in North American history. The name itself reflected older naming habits. A 30 caliber bullet with a charge historically described as 30 grains of smokeless powder. In practice, The importance was not the label. It was the performance envelope. The 30-30 gave ordinary hunters a relatively light, manageable cartridge with enough reach and power for deer-sized game at practical woodland distances. It was not a long-range military cartridge. It was not the most powerful hunting round available. It did not need to be. Its genius was fit. It fit the rifle. It fit the forests. It fit the shoulder. It fit the budget of a working man who wanted one dependable rifle and did not want a lecture from a gunmaker about theory. The rifle was handy. The cartridge was effective. The brand was trusted. That combination is harder to defeat than raw technical superiority. A lever-action rifle works through a physical rhythm that explains much of its appeal. The shooter lowers the lever, which unlocks the action, withdraws the bolt, extracts and ejects the fired case, and prepares the next cartridge to rise from the magazine system, returning the lever chambers a fresh round and locks the action again. The motion is visible, mechanical, and satisfying. It turns the rifle into a machine the user can feel. This mattered in the late 19th century because familiarity was part of market acceptance. Bolt-action rifles were gaining military respect around the world, but many American civilian shooters were already comfortable with lever actions. Winchester did not ask them to abandon that habit. It gave them a lever gun adapted to a new cartridge age. That was the first business insight behind the 1894. Innovation does not always win by looking new. Sometimes it wins by hiding the new inside a familiar ritual. The second insight was distribution. Winchester was not a small shop selling to men who happened to walk through the door. It was a national manufacturer with advertising reach, dealer networks, catalog visibility, and a brand already charged with frontier meaning. A rifle could move from New Haven through wholesalers, hardware stores, sporting goods dealers, and mail-order channels into rural America. Sears, Roebuck, and other catalog houses helped create a retail universe in which a farmer, rancher, or small-town hunter could study specifications at a kitchen table and imagine ownership before he ever touched the gun. The Model 1894 arrived into that system at the right time. America was urbanizing, but millions of people still hunted, trapped, farmed, and lived close to land. Deer hunting was becoming not just subsistence or local practice, but a seasonal ritual. Game laws, conservation movements, and sporting culture were slowly reshaping how Americans thought about wildlife. In the North Woods, the Appalachians, the Upper Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, and parts of Canada, a compact repeating rifle in 30-30 made practical sense. Here is where the myth begins to detach from the calendar. The Winchester 1894 is often imagined in a world of stagecoaches, cavalry scouts, and open-range cowboys. Some examples certainly went west. Some were carried by lawmen, ranchers, trappers, guards, and people living in remote places. Lever-action carbines were useful where a short, quick-handling rifle mattered. But the Model 1894's deepest conquest was not the classic cattle trail west of the 1870s. It was the 20th century hunting culture that remembered the West while living somewhere else. The rifle turned frontier imagery into a durable consumer identity. A man in Pennsylvania could buy a Winchester and feel connected to Wyoming. A hunter in Michigan could carry a rifle whose advertising carried the smell of sagebrush even if the real terrain was wet cedar and snow. A boy in Maine could inherit a 30-30 from his father and receive, along with the gun, an American story about self-reliance, wood skill, and old iron that still worked. The Model 1894 did not need to win the West. The West had already become an idea. Winchester helped package that idea in walnut and steel. The New Haven factory was the quiet force behind this transformation. A successful rifle is not only a design, it is a repeated design. One good prototype proves intelligence. 1 million functioning rifles prove an industrial system. Winchester's plant depended on machine tools, gauges, fixtures, trained workers, inspection routines, heat treatment, stock shaping, barrel making, bluing, assembly, and repair knowledge. The romance went into the advertisement. The reality lived on the factory floor. The American system of manufacturing, often associated with interchangeable parts and precision production, had deep roots in the arms industry. By the time the Model 1894 entered production, Winchester had decades of experience turning complex mechanisms into repeatable commercial products. The challenge was not merely to make a lever action strong enough for modern ammunition. The challenge was to make it by the thousands at a price the market could bear, with parts that fit and actions that cycled. This is where tolerances become destiny. A rifle that feels smooth is not smooth by accident. The bolt, carrier, lever, locking surfaces, hammer, trigger, and magazine system all have to cooperate. If tolerances are too loose, the rifle may feel crude, wear poorly, or lose consistency. If tolerances are too tight, it may become expensive, sensitive to dirt, or difficult to assemble at scale. The Model 1894 succeeded because it lived in the middle zone, strong enough, smooth enough, light enough, affordable enough. Enough is one of the most powerful words in manufacturing. The Model 1894 was not the most advanced rifle of the 20th century. It did not become a dominant military arm. It was not a precision target rifle in the way specialized bolt actions would become. It did not defeat every competitor by specification. Its endurance came from balance. In the real world, balance often outlives brilliance. By the early 20th century, the 1894 had become a standard American sporting rifle. Production continued, variations appeared, barrel lengths and configurations changed, and the 30-30 chambering became almost inseparable from the model's identity. Other cartridges were offered over time, and collectors today pay close attention to configuration, condition, year of manufacture, special order features, and markings. But for the broader public, the phrase Winchester 30-30 became a kind of shorthand. It meant a deer rifle. That cultural clarity is rare. Many firearms become famous among experts. Fewer become understood instantly by people who do not read technical catalogs. The 1894 crossed that line. It also survived the loss of its own inventor. Browning's relationship with Winchester eventually ended. The common account centers on his request for a royalty arrangement on a new semi-automatic shotgun design and Winchester's refusal to depart from its established practice of outright purchase. Browning took the design elsewhere, to Fabrique Nationale in Belgium, and the gun became the Browning Auto 5, one of the most successful semi-automatic shotguns ever produced. The exact emotional temperature of that boardroom break is difficult to reconstruct from a distance, but the structural fact is clear. Winchester lost its most important outside source of firearm invention. The Model 1894, however, was already inside the walls. That is another lesson in industrial history. A company can lose the future and still profit from the past for a long time. Winchester had Browning's earlier designs. It had the name, it had the plant, it had the distribution, it had rifles customers still wanted. The machine kept running. Then war changed the factory. During the First World War, and again during the Second World War, American arms manufacturers were pulled into military production on a scale that transformed capacity, labor, priorities, and capital equipment. Winchester produced military arms and ammunition under government contracts, and the New Haven plant became part of a national war production system. Civilian sporting arms did not disappear permanently, but they were no longer the center of gravity during wartime peaks. This matters to the 1894 because its survival was not automatic. A commercial rifle line can be interrupted by war, material shortages, labor shifts, and military contracts. After a war, customers may return, or they may not. They may have adopted different technologies. They may have changed habits. They may be poorer, richer, more urban, or less interested. The 1894 returned because demand remained alive. After the Second World War, American hunting culture expanded with rising incomes, automobiles, improved roads, surplus military familiarity with firearms, and a growing sporting goods market. The Winchester 1894 had the advantage of being old enough to feel proven and current enough to remain useful. In 1950, Winchester marked the production of the 1 millionth Model 1894, a milestone widely cited in histories of the rifle and a sign of its extraordinary commercial reach. 1 million is not just a number. It is evidence that a design has escaped novelty. It has entered infrastructure. By then, the Model 1894 was woven into ammunition production, parts supply, gunsmith knowledge, sporting literature, family use, and resale markets. A rifle that common becomes easier to keep common. Ammunition makers continue loading the cartridge because rifles exist in huge numbers. Retailers stock the ammunition because customers own the rifles. Hunters buy the rifles because ammunition is everywhere. The loop reinforces itself. This is how a product becomes an institution. But institutions can hollow out while the product remains visible. The most famous fracture came in 1964. Winchester, then under Olin ownership, implemented major manufacturing changes across several product lines. Collectors and shooters still speak of pre-64 Winchesters because that year became a dividing line between older production standards and cost-reduced methods. The details varied by model, and historians debate the fairness of some judgments, but the perception became permanent. Pre-1964 Winchesters represented a higher point of New Haven fit, finish, and traditional machining. For the Model 1894, the issue was not that post-1964 rifles suddenly ceased to function. Many worked perfectly well for ordinary hunting. The deeper issue was trust. Buyers could feel that something had changed. Collectors could see it. Gunsmiths could describe it. Metal finish, small parts, checkering methods, internal geometry. And the general sense of hand-fitted quality became part of a before and after story. The company had made a rational cost decision. The market turned it into a moral judgment. That is what happens when a brand sells tradition. Every saving becomes visible as betrayal. Winchester was facing real pressures. American manufacturing costs were rising. Skilled labor was expensive. Older factories required investment. Foreign competition was increasing in sporting arms. New materials and methods changed consumer expectations. Bolt-action rifles, semi-automatic rifles, and later synthetic-stocked designs competed for attention. The lever-action deer rifle still had a market, but it was no longer the obvious future of firearms technology. The Model 1894 survived, but it no longer defined the direction of the industry. In 1981, Olin sold the Winchester firearms manufacturing business to a new company, U.S. Repeating Arms Company, while retaining ownership of the Winchester trademark and licensing its use. That legal separation is one of the most important facts in the modern Winchester story. The factory and the name were no longer the same thing. The name could travel, the factory could not. At first, production continued in New Haven. Rifles still carried the Winchester identity. Customers still saw the familiar brand. But underneath the surface, the structure had changed. A licensed manufacturer operating an aging plant under financial pressure is not the same as an integrated company building its own brand with long-term industrial control. The arrangement struggled. U.S. Repeating Arms entered bankruptcy in the late 1980s. Ownership and control shifted through arrangements involving the Herstal Group, the Belgian parent associated with FN. Production continued for years, but the old problem remained. The Winchester name was valuable, the New Haven factory was costly, and the Model 1894, though beloved, could not by itself reverse the economics of an aging American arms plant. By the early 2000s, the gap between symbol and structure had become too wide. The 2006 closure ended regular New Haven production of the Model 1894. It did not end the rifle. It ended the original industrial setting that had given the rifle much of its meaning. Later, Winchester-branded Model 1894 rifles would be made by Moroku in Japan, under licensing arrangements connected to the modern Winchester and Browning brand structure. Miraku has a strong reputation for high-quality sporting arms manufacturing, and many modern Japanese-made Winchesters are respected for fit and finish. This is important to say clearly. The story is not that Japanese production made the rifle inferior. The story is that the rifle's identity changed because the chain of place, labor, and memory changed. A modern Model 1894 can be beautifully made and still not be a New Haven rifle. That distinction is why collectors care about markings, serial ranges, production years, condition, and provenance. A pre-1964 Model 1894 is not merely an old gun. It is a surviving artifact of a manufacturing culture. A New Haven-marked rifle from before the plant closure carries a different historical charge from a later licensed production gun. The difference is not only mechanical, it is institutional. The name survived. The original institution did not. Today, the Winchester 1894 lives in several worlds at once. In the collector's world, early rifles, rare configurations, special order examples, high-condition carbines, and documented historical pieces can command serious attention. Museums such as the Cody Firearms Museum preserve Winchester history at a scale no private memory could maintain. The Smithsonian and other institutions hold firearms connected to national figures and broader American material culture. Collectors' associations and factory records help identify dates, features, and authenticity. In the hunting world, the 1894 remains what it has long been, a practical rifle for certain terrain and certain expectations. The 30-30 Winchester is still loaded because generations of rifles still need it and generations of hunters still trust it. In dense woods, where shots are often moderate and handling matters, the old logic has not disappeared. In the cultural world, the rifle has become shorthand for a version of America that is partly historical and partly invented. It appears in stories, films, family photographs, gun racks, estate sales, and November memories. It carries the aura of the frontier even when the actual rifle was purchased decades after the frontier closed. That is the final genius of the Model 1894. It did not freeze the frontier in time. It converted the frontier into a repeatable object. A myth can be fragile when it lives only in words. Winchester made it mechanical. You could hold it, work the lever, see the cartridge lift, feel the hammer set, carry it through wet leaves or across a pasture, pass it down. The action gave the myth a sound. But a myth with steel inside it still depends on economics. The 1894's rise required Browning's design talent, Winchester's factory system, smokeless powder ammunition, national distribution, rural demand, and a public ready to buy a modern rifle wrapped in frontier feeling. Its decline as a New Haven product required different forces: cost pressure, corporate restructuring, changing tastes, aging equipment, separated trademarks, and the slow erosion of place-based manufacturing culture. No single villain is large enough to explain it. That is what makes the story worth telling. The rifle was not killed by one bad manager. It was not saved by nostalgia alone. It lived because its design matched a market better than almost anyone expected. It lost its original home because 20th century manufacturing economics eventually stopped rewarding the system that had built it. There is a small historical irony at the center of all this. John Moses Browning, the Utah gunsmith whose design helped Winchester create one of its longest-lasting products, ended his career not in New Haven but in Liege, Belgium, working with FN. The modern corporate world later tied the Winchester and Browning names into ownership and licensing structures that would have been unimaginable when Bennett first traveled west to see Browning's work. The old rival paths bent back toward each other. The inventor left, the design stayed. The brand moved, the factory closed, and the rifle kept cycling. That is why the Winchester 1894 should not be understood merely as the rifle of cowboys, sheriffs, and frontier posters. It is more interesting than that. It is a case study in timing. It appeared when smokeless powder needed a familiar American platform. It reached buyers when catalog distribution